sort of getting through. Yeah, the voice in your head can be your worst enemy. So what I've been doing and working on doing is like throughout the day, you know, they say to meditate in the beginning of the day and then in the evening at the end of the day. I try to make my whole day a meditation. And how I define meditation is essentially detaching attention. Hey, Brita, how are ya? It's the folks from our Telegram group. We have Manpreet, we got Brita jumping in. I don't know who else is. How you doing? How you doing? I've got newscaster voice. I've never heard that before. So I try to make, somebody just commented, all of life is a meditation. Absolutely. So I try to make my daily life a meditation. To join the Telegram group, it's actually just go through the link in the bio on my profile. So what I try to make my life a daily meditation, what I mean by that is just continuously shifting focus away from my internal monologue and to the moment. This is my newest painting. It took me, it's so detailed. I actually have to do a film. I think on my Instagram, it's not my first live, Heather. It's like my 7th or 8th. Or maybe it's your first live. Yeah, I rarely go live. I need to do more. But like I was saying to the guys and gals who just popped in, my internal monologue gets the best of me and sort of gets to overthinking. And yeah, yours. Welcome. And I get to overthinking and then I just think like, oh, it's going to be awful. I don't think. I hear it. I hear the internal monologue telling me it's going to be awful. The vibe's going to be off. Nobody's going to understand what you're saying. And then it's just this like constant battle until eventually I go like, hey, why don't you shut the fuck up, right? And then I go live. And so this is me conquering, hey Jamie, my internal monologue and going live again. It's a constant battle, but the hope is through time, when you turn your daily life into a meditation, you can get into the habit, just like it took you time, however old you are, it took you time to get to this point where it's become normative when you listen to this thing. I think through time, you can learn to sort of shift your attention away from it and sort of drown it or let's say starve it. And so that is what my intention will be over time. So not just meditating first thing in the morning and then at night, but just throughout the day. Anytime I catch myself listening to this internal monologue, shifting my focus away from it. Every time I catch myself sort of zoning out, because they say it's thinking, but it's not thinking, is it? Right? Because you're not actively taking control of the internal monologue and then like using it. So when you sit, for example, to write, right? To write an email, to write a story, to write a text message, you are actually thinking. But the rest of the time, what you think is thinking is actually just the internal monologue, just talking shit, right? Isn't it? So what you want to do is when you catch yourself listening to this thing, just like being absolutely negative, is remove your attention from it and focus on what's going on in the present moment. What I like to tell myself is if I had a friend that was like just this negative all the time, like there's a popular expression right now where everybody goes like no bad vibes, but like you've got a bad vibe in your head, right? Like 24/7, right? So I think it's on Instagram, there's a page I follow, kind of toxic. It's called Justin LA Boy or Justin LaBoy. And it like the whole page is like sort of memes, but like funny and kind of toxic memes. And sometimes you'll see a post where they're like, I'm quick to cut a motherfucker off when they're negative. I don't need any like bad vibes in my life. But it's like your whole head is negative. Like you have a voice in your head that's like consistently like talking shit. Why don't you cut that voice off, right? Like why don't you learn to detach attention? Like the same way you block a person if they're negative, block your internal monologue if it's negative, right? Like work on doing that. It takes time, right? Because we've been conditioned in our society to sort of associate, right? We think that voice in our head is ours, right? So a lot of people will say like, not everybody has an internal monologue. Yes, they do. Literally 100% of people that I've communicated with who have said that they don't have an internal monologue. When I ask them, okay, then what causes you anxiety? Okay, what causes you like to be like depressed? Like what causes depression? Like what causes you to worry? They start to realize, oh, they do. The problem is that they're so identified with their internal monologue that there's no space between it. So they think that that's them. There's no space between thought and action. So if they can get into the habit of slowing down their thinking process, then they can start to see, they can start to observe that they absolutely do have an internal monologue, right? And that they can create space. And then you work on non-reactivity, then you work on not listening to it, then you work on shifting focus away from it and to the present moment. Hey, how are you? Just want to say hello to the new people. Hi, Rudy. One thing I noticed also is how draining it can be, in the sense of there's a person that I kind of associate with, where every time I have a conversation with them, when I'm done talking to them, I feel tired. Like I just like, you get off the phone and I'm like, oh God, I'm going to pass. I'm not going to say who it is. But over time, I started to realize that it's not necessarily who the person, it's not the individual themselves, because they're actually wonderful human beings. I think that it is I still believe in the tooth fairy, and I stand by that. Sorry. But how deep the programming is. Yes. So there's some people that are like that, and it's not like they're bad people. It's just the way I like to think of it is that they are, let's say, infested by a mind parasite, a psychic parasite. And that is kind of working through them. It's talking through them. And symptoms of this is when they, for example, I'm not Beyonce, is when, for example, you listen to them talk and they tend to be very critical, very judgmental, and very negative. And over time, like especially if you're on the phone for like, an hour, you start to feel that what that impact of that constant stream of negativity starts to do to your mind, starts to do to your energy, which is what brought me to, one of the things brought me to the conclusion that it's got to be some sort of like energetic parasite. It's kind of hard, I think, to kind of delve in on this. But I do talk about this on the podcast. I think when I want to talk about things like, I don't know, should I talk about this? They're very dense topics, right? And it's hard to talk about it live when you're also trying to like talk to people. Hey, Larkland, how are you? It's hard when your family is source. Absolutely. I totally get that. But I think it helps to set really strong boundaries. So for me, one thing I know is that I was just thinking about you today. I've been MIA. I haven't been, well, I kind of have been actually. What are my thoughts on sudden savant syndrome? So go and listen to the podcast, because I actually talk about that a fair bit. I can only say so much on TikTok. So I do have a podcast as well, so that I can sort of delve in a bit deeper and talk about things like, okay, what is really behind the sudden savant syndrome, right? And what is that really telling us? So I talked about that on the podcast, so please go check it out. Can't really deep dive into the topic with too many people. Exactly. Especially when people are just popping in and out or whatever. So I always encourage people to check out the podcast. I have a theory that I'm working on. Those who listen to the podcast know that for the last like week or two, I have been trying to sort of, I don't want to say like make myself depressed. I've been microdosing totally natural fungi over the last like year or so, like 4 days on, about a month or two off. That's kind of my thing. And then I also take sulforaphane, which is like broccoli sprouts. And it's got me in a really nice vibe. The problem is that it's hard to be really creative when you're just like, everything is chill, right? So it helped me deal with my internal monologue. It helped me deal with my anxiety, helped me deal with the depression. Actually, I hadn't had a depressive spell since I started microdosing. But what I noticed was, on the downside, is that I couldn't think deeper. So I had to take some time over the last 2 weeks to sort of allow it to kind of get out of my system, so that I can have kind of more deeper thoughts. And yesterday I sort of had this conclusion about, and so this is, you guys are going to get you're going to be like my first people to hear this theory. Okay. So let me know when you're ready. You guys ready? You guys ready to hear this theory that I came up with yesterday, like last night? It's been a while since I had this, like, Dara, how are you? I got to follow you. Okay. All right. Cool. Okay, cool. Okay, I see all the yeses. All right, cool. Okay. So here's go. This is really wild. So I might like zone out a little bit just so I could say it, so I don't get distracted by like what's going on. I'll try not to get distracted by what's going on. But what I was thinking about is something called, you guys with me? Are you guys ready? You got to stay with me. All right. So I was thinking about auditory consciousness, right? Auditory consciousness. What I mean by that is that I want you guys, so I keep sort of like in different ways I've been saying that what we expect aliens to show up as, yeah, I'm about to talk about aliens, but what we expect aliens to show up as is not what we've been conditioned, is not what we've been conditioned to expect aliens to show up as may not necessarily be true. It may be a very like small, like a sliver of possibility of what could actually, what forms aliens could take, right? So what I've said, for example, is that in past videos and on the podcast, I've said that we think that aliens are going to come on a spaceship because that's how we are programmed to travel. Right now, we think that the best way to travel to other planets and other, galaxies is by using sort of machines, right? Is by using spaceships, by like burning fossil fuels. But that's a limitation of our imagination. That doesn't mean that that's the only way to travel across space and time. But because we are limited by our imaginations, so we now think that when aliens come, or if aliens should come, morning, Kyle, if aliens should come to our dimension or our reality, they're going to show up in spaceships, because literally like 99% of all freaking like alien movies are basically showing us the same thing, almost programming us to expect aliens to only take one form. They're going to be relatively humanoid. They might have big eyes, they might have green skin, but they're going to have like 2 legs, 2 hands. They're going to show up on a spaceship or flying saucer, and they're going to talk and speak English and say, take us to, like, a limitation. We are limited by our lack of an imagination. So my thought process is that anything, yes, so much of our thinking is absolutely programmed. So my thought process is that anything that would come to this world would not necessarily have to take the form or explore space the way we would explore space. It could absolutely come through, I've posited black holes, I've posited wormholes, I've posited that they could just exist concurrently in our dimension. And yesterday night, the idea that I had was, could consciousness, all right, here we go. Could consciousness exist only as an auditory consciousness? So what I mean by that is, once again, we are conditioned to expect aliens, right? Something that is not of this world to be corporeal, to be photonic, to be visual, something that we could see. But could there be entities where they exist purely as sound? So I'll say this again. Could entities exist that are purely sound? Auditory consciousness. So I'm writing all this out, and then I started thinking, like, the thought of the Bible. So as you guys may or may not know, I'm not a religious person, okay? However, I do like to pull information from wherever I pull information, from wherever I can get inspiration from, right? So I started thinking about the Bible and the story of Genesis, and it said, in the beginning was the Word. What if you took that line and you rephrased it, and instead of saying in the beginning was the Word, you looked at it and changed the translation a little bit and said, in the beginning was sound. In the beginning was the sound, right? An auditory consciousness. And then it said, right, let there be light. So sound, a wave function. All right, it's going to start to sound weird, but stay with me. Sound first existed as a wave function, right? So as you guys may or may not be familiar with, right, we have wave particle duality, right? So wave particle duality, think of it as existing simultaneously in 2 dimensions, constantly shifting until consciousness sort of fixates it in 1 dimension. So if we're going to go back to the story of Genesis, and we say in the beginning was sound, right? We have wave particle duality. In the beginning was wave, like a sound. Think of a sound wave. So think of a sound wave as a wave, right? And then it collapses into a particle. And then that collapse becomes a photonic particle where the sound then produces light, and it says, let there be light in a beginning. Yes. And then it says, let there be light. So the wave collapsed into a particle, right? So basically what that was telling me, and it was kind of an epiphany, is that an intelligence could exist as just pure, like auditory, like a pure sound wave. Okay. And then I started to think, like, could aliens exists as pure sound wave. There was a quote that I read in a book by, I think, Colin Wilson. I think it was Mind Parasites. And the book was called The Mind Parasite. And in it, he talked about space. Now, this was fun. I really like reading this. I typically don't read a lot of fiction, but I really like that story. And what he talked about was space. So you guys understand that on a quantum level, we are not solid, right? So you guys understand that on a quantum level, we're not solid. Like if you break everything down to subatomic particles, on the quantum level, we're empty space. So we're not actually solid, right? Like we're not. Okay, so what that tells me is that space then is not, there is no separation. Form doesn't really separate outer space, like what we think of as outer space, from inner space. It's all space, right? And now the sort of present understanding is that microscopic, stay with me guys, sorry. If I'm like going off on a weird tangent, let me know. And also please understand, I'm going to put this, we don't know what mass is, right? So we kind of use these, we're not solid. Why are you arguing with me? Just go and Google it. I literally told you how to Google it. Anyway, I don't want to get off the train of thought. So I did just get off the train of thought. So if the body is essentially like an illusion of solidity, then what is in outer space? So what is possible in outer space is also possible in inner space, in the mind. And so what appears to be a separation from us in outer space is an illusion, right? So then that means that if microscopic, so they say, it is understood that microscopic black holes are constantly sort of emerging in and out of existence in outer space. So then the argument is that it could also emerge. Did he get kicked out? Britta, was that you? I know that was Britta. Then microscopic black holes could also sort of pop into existence within the mind. Because bear in mind that we cannot actually find the mind, right? The mind, like we have the brain, right? But the brain the mind itself is an intangible, I would argue it's like its own dimension, but that's another conversation. A microscopic wormhole could spring into existence in the mind as well. Does that make sense? So then carrying along this train of thoughts, remember I said this was going to be like a long thing, carrying along that train of thought, then is it possible for non-corporeal entities, specifically an auditory intelligence, right, or an auditory consciousness, is it possible for an auditory intelligence to enter what we consider the mind, which I just said could be its own dimension? Is it possible for an auditory intelligence to enter the mind through a microscopic black hole? And that may be what the internal monologue is, right? Because I keep saying mind parasites, mind parasites, mind parasites. So could it be, instead of, if you don't want to accept that the human race has been infected by a mind parasite, then could you accept the probability that an auditory consciousness or an auditory intelligence, an intelligence that exists in non-corporeal form, merely as sound, like I just used the analogy, right, of the Bible, the story of Genesis, where it says, in the beginning was the word, in the beginning was sound. So that, could you accept the fact that an auditory intelligence could exist in a non-physical form and inhabit the mind, or have entered the mind? And could that be what the mind parasite, the internal monologue is? So think about like a song, for example, like energy, right? So can a song itself be, I'm loving you guys' response by the way, and I'm going to put this on the YouTube because I was trying to like flesh this out. I usually, when I talk or I do like my podcast, I don't have like lights on me. You guys can't see, there's like too many lights on me. I usually sit in the dark to record my podcast, which is why there's no videos of me, of my podcast, because I don't like light. I kind of feel like out of darkness, energies come. So I wrote it all out, and then I was going to like flesh it out before recording it on a podcast. But I guess you guys are really encouraging, so I appreciate you. I'm going to put this on my YouTube channel, and then I'm going to do a deeper dive on this on the podcast when there's not like two lights right in my fucking face, so I can concentrate on what I was trying to say. But I think that it is certainly possible. To go back to what I was talking, I'm not ignoring what you guys are saying. I'm reading what you guys are saying. But I just want to like get this out so I don't like go off on another tangent because I think this is important. But to go back to, for example, music. Let's talk about music. How many of you guys love music? I mean, everybody. I mean, I don't know if anybody is going to like be like, I fucking hate songs. I mean, if you do, I'm sorry. But I was thinking about like songs. So like 2 weeks ago, of like last week's episode of Your One Black Friend podcast, that's the name of my podcast. Yeah, everybody loves music. Somebody said music is life. I guess channeled. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. But so I was trying to make myself depressed. I've already set it up. If you listen to podcasts, you know what I'm doing. Like I didn't want to be miserable. I was, like I said earlier, for those of you who are new, what I said earlier was that I had been microdosing, and microdosing kind of kept me here. But the problem is when you're microdosing and you're taking like broccoli sprouts and sulforaphane, like you can't really be as creative because like everything is zen, right? You're just like, life is great and everything like that. You know what I mean? So I wanted to bring myself down here because I feel like in depression, I am normally a depressive person. So in depression is when I can go deep, but I have to learn to manage it. And that's why a lot of artists, they get lost in a depression. The key is to not get stuck there, right? The key, it says my painting. The key is to not get stuck in depression. The key is also knowing how to come in and out. It's like imagine depression as sort of a depth, right? And you can, and it's like water. It's like an ocean of water, and you can go deep into it to pull ideas. Ideas are in that level, right? But the problem with a lot of writers, a lot of creators, a lot of artists is that they stay in it. So you have to know how to get yourself out of it. And so I had to go deep. So I had to like stop taking microdosing. I had to stop taking the sulforaphane for, it's been about a week now, a week and a half now, so that I could be creative. Because I noticed I hadn't been as sharp as I used to be as far as like creativity was concerned. I was happy as fuck, but like I was like trying to write and it wasn't coming through. And I realized like I can't create from the space. You have to, like, even when you plant, right? Like when you plant a seed, it is in the darkness that, you know, things grow. So I'm not afraid of the darkness. I'm not afraid to get depressed. I just increase my meditation, and things like that so that I can balance myself out. And I know how to get myself out of those states now. Like I said, microdosing and sulforaphane, broccoli sprouts extract. So I've talked about this on the podcast as well. Hi. And so before I sort of dropped, I kind of took like a double microdose of what I normally take to kind of bring myself up, because I knew that by making myself go up, I was going to get down the next day, because balance, like somebody commented, it's all about balance, right? And so when I was like kind of high, it wasn't like enough for a trip. It was just enough to like kind of be like, yay, everything's all good. I started like hearing a song. So I'm going to tie it all together. I'm talking about sound as an intelligence. So I started hearing a song. I was like hearing a song that I never heard before. And I'm telling you guys, like I heard this in my head. I heard the song in my head and I could almost hear the lyrics. And I was like, this is like cheating almost. Like, is this what like music? I've never written songs before. I'm primarily an artist and a writer. I've never like created a song before. So I just sat there and I was like, I can hear a song. So I recorded it and then I wrote out the lyrics in like 20 minutes. And then I talked about it on the podcast, and people were commenting on the YouTube. They were like, you channeled that. And I didn't know what that was. But then, I mean, I heard people talk about channeling like higher entities or whatever, but I've never actually had that really happen to me before. So I was like, oh, that's cool. But then it made me think, like, did I channel the song? All right, this is where it gets weird. And I'm going to find somebody to record this. I'm not a singer. So I'm actually in the back of my mind, I'm working on something, like trying to like, well, I'm putting the energy out there, and I've talked to a couple of people. I'm going to try to produce it and put it on the YouTube channel. But what the thought came to me yesterday when I finally was able to like write, and that's where this thought came from, was, could it be, what if I'm not channeling a song? What if I'm actually what if what if the microdose or the double microdose actually opened up space in like a mind, like created a little wormhole in my mind? This is just theory now at this point, okay? So conjecture. But what if the mushrooms actually opened up like a little gateway, and the song actually came through, and the song itself was an intelligence, right? An auditory consciousness. And now it's in my mind, and now it wants to like reproduce and take seed in the minds of other people. And then I was like thinking, like, just songs in general, like you can't tell me on some level, okay, it's going to sound weird, but who cares? You can't tell me on some level that like music, that sounds, that songs specifically aren't an intelligence, like aren't intelligent. Like I'm starting to think that they are, because think about it. You can't touch a song. Like, you can write the notes to it, right? But you can't touch a song. Like I can't touch a song, but man, there's some songs out there that you like listen to, and you can feel the energy, like it affects you, right? Like there's a couple of songs I've actually talked about the podcast where you hear it and like it makes like I cry. If that's not, I mean, that's something, right? It's something that's acting on your person. It's an energy. It's an energy that's sort of affecting your mind, your consciousness, right? So could it be possible that it might be an intelligence, but just because we're not really conditioned to think of an intelligence as something that doesn't take physical form, we miss it. We miss the importance of it, right? Like, for example, I was thinking, like, if somebody took people are commenting, like, they get so emotional. How can something that you can't touch affect you on an emotional level? Like, to me, I feel like there's something going on there that could music be a type of intelligence? Could certain songs be, like, could a song be a person, right? A person in the way that we have come to understand a person. Strings, oh my gosh, yes, I love strings. It's like string instruments together, like a concerto. Oh my gosh, yes, you're my person. So that's that was my sort of like thought process. And then I thought, like, if you, for example, say they take you, right? And a person records your entire life, like everything you've ever said. Thanks for all the gifts, guys. Everything you ever said from the beginning of your life to the end of your life, somebody like recorded it, right? But then you were no longer physical, right? They zapped you and you were no longer physical, but you existed only as sound. Do you still exist, right? And then if somebody took everything you will ever say in your entire life, I'm going like this, but here. If somebody took everything you'll ever say in your entire life and condensed it and then played it, right? If they couldn't see you physically, but your words and everything you've ever said and the impact that it had in this world could energetically impact you, isn't that a kind of life form? Isn't that a kind of like existence? It may not be existence in the way that we think of existence, but could it be a type of existence, right? Like, yeah, somebody says you'd have to define existence, but who's to say that the way we define existence is the right? It's just a definition. It's a collective definition. It's a collective sort of mindset. We have said that to exist, these are the check boxes that, it has to check in order to be classified as existence. But who's to say that that's it? Who could say that that's it? It's just one way to define things. And sometimes when you define things, you close your mind, you block your mind from perceiving things that don't fall within that definition. So you almost blind yourself by accepting a particular definition. You get what I mean? Anyway, I just went on a whole rant. I want to hear what you guys say. Frank Ocean can hear colors. I forget what that's called, but yeah, it's like synesthesia, I think. Yeah, that's true though. Good point. Like, that's another thing. Just because, so synesthesia, right? If you could, hey Enrique, how are you? Medium Yonsei. What? Okay, don't distract me. Once again, going back to the idea of an auditory consciousness. I can hear colors and see my names of colors. Yeah. So that's our limitation, right? Even the fact that, like, just saying that something could exist only as an auditory, like, intelligence, right? How do we really know that? If I'm only, like, let's just say all of the most beautiful songs you've ever heard actually exists in form, right? Like, let's just say that you could see the way a bee could see. I don't know how bees could see, but let's just say that you have that level of perception the way a bee could see. And then you played your favorite song. Who's to say that your favorite song doesn't take form, doesn't become like this, like, thing that you can't perceive because of the limitations of your perception on these five senses that you're presently confined to, right? Like, we are so, it becomes energy, somebody just said. We're so limited by these bodies. We're so limited by our senses that we think that because we can't perceive something, it can't exist. Or because we define something in a particular way, that it has to sort of go according to our definition of something. And who's to say that? Just because we say something and just because we believe something doesn't make it so, doesn't make it true. Like, it's just our definition, right? There could be whole entities right now walking around us, not existing, maybe not humanoid, right? Maybe not in physical form, but we can, because we can only see sort of matter-based energy or like photonic energy, right? Because of our limitations, we are now projecting that limitation to like existence itself. And I keep saying existence and the universe or the multiverse doesn't give a fuck what we think. Like, it doesn't care what we think. It doesn't care how we choose to define it. There's so much going on that's like right under our noses, right in front of our face, that we completely miss because of the way we've been programmed. You love my rants? I didn't realize I was ranting, but I guess it is a rant. Anyway, yeah, that's my rant on, everything. All right, I want to read what you guys are saying. Random. What about psychic abilities? I think that, so psychic abilities, that's something that, for example, we're told like it's supernatural or paranormal. But the thing is that I think a lot of people, if they're actually open to it, will find that they're actually more inclined towards being psychic, or they have intrinsic sort of psychic abilities than we've been programmed to think. So then I don't think that it's abnormal, right? Like the big one is when you feel somebody staring at you, right? Like you're driving. When you're driving, and like this happened to me actually. I was like driving on the highway, and for some reason I just turned and looked, and I looked like dead at the driver. They were looking at me, and I was like, that was weird. But like I felt it before I saw it. But that extrasensory perception could theoretically fall under the category of paranormal, right? Like being able to sense when you're being observed, being able to sense when you're being watched, right? It's considered paranormal. But if we all pretty much have this latent ability, like I know every single one of you have been in a situation where, like I've just described, where you're like walking or driving and then turn and you look dead in the soul of somebody who's like observing you, right? Like looking right at you. Then if we're pretty much, the most of us are capable of doing this, then how is that abnormal or paranormal? I think it falls within the lines of absolutely normal. It's just that in the society that we live in right now, we are programmed to think that if it doesn't fall under what is considered normative, then it's not possible, or it's, it's this like woo-woo thing. But I don't believe that. Not even just knowing when, creepy thing though. Have you guys ever been alone in the house? This keeps happening to me and it's starting to freak me out. Right? Have you guys ever been alone in the house and that you feel that feeling like somebody's right behind you, and then you turn and there's nobody there? Hey, thanks for that. That keeps happening to me. It's not scary, but it is like freaking me out a little bit. Does that happen to you guys? Somebody said no, never. Okay. My thing is that if you can sense when you're being looked at, like when you're driving or whatever, and you can like look at a person, then something clearly is observing you. It's just something that's not physical. It's just something that you can't perceive with your eyes. Because if you could see it and then there's a confirmation when it's an actual person, and then you could feel it and you turn and look and there's nobody there, it's not that there's nobody there, it's you can't see it, but you definitely felt that shit. Like, I know you felt it. So that was just something I wanted to freak you guys out with wherever you are at night. Absolutely, we do feel energy. Come on now, like, what is this common thing that we're talking about right now where we're like, no bad vibes? What do you think that means? Vibe, energy, something that you're picking up on a non-physical level. Like you've met somebody, it's the creeper. I never get a bad vibe from it. I just feel like, okay, somebody was definitely there. I don't know. But you ever like met somebody where like the moment you meet them, you're just like, something's not right, you know? I'm gonna see what you guys are saying. And then like after that, you like, as you get to know the person, you realize that vibe was right? What are you picking up on? You're picking up on, in my opinion, I think you're picking up on like patterns of like negative, like energy that this individual has consistently sort of been exposed to. You're picking up on energy, right? So you can't be like, no bad vibes, or like, I vibe with you, without acknowledging that on some level, what you're doing is you're acknowledging that you're able to perceive energy. You're able to perceive vibration. Not to sound like woo-woo or whatever, but you guys know what I mean. You guys know what I mean. I hope you guys know what I mean. Anyway, all right, I want to read what you guys are saying. What are you guys saying? What are you guys saying? We have our energy and it can't be created or destroyed. Everything, my culture taught to treat them like regular people, and sometimes I talk to them. Yeah, I try not to talk to things I don't see. Like, I'm really good at just ignoring shit. Like I'll sense it and then be like, and then keep it moving. But I won't like acknowledge. I mean, now I'm kind of acknowledging it. But for the most part, like when I feel it, like if I feel somebody like behind me and then I turn and look and I don't see anything, I just like pretend I was looking for something else. Because I just feel like the moment you like, you know, acknowledge that, then like, I don't think it's psychosis. I think we all have this ability. So I don't think it's that. Maybe for some it might be psychosis, but I don't think that's, what do you say? Hi, right? Like that would be weird. And then like, what you say hi to this thing and then it says hi back to you, and then that's a weird conversation, right? Let's see. Okay, how would you define consciousness if it's our true nature or self? That's a great question. I have described or defined consciousness as just intelligence, information, intelligence, not like that. That's how I would define it, because to me it's easier. And then it allowed me to, for example, like when you talk about animals, right? It's a type of like, animals have their own type of consciousness, their own type of intelligence, right? So then, like right now I'm talking about auditory consciousness. I personally, I'm not saying that you have to use this, but what makes it easy for me is when I interchangeably will use consciousness with intelligence and awareness, right? So that's how I define consciousness. All right, I want to answer you guys because you have such great questions. The little companion here is a small torture to not sit across from you and just sit. Aw, well, that's sweet. That's very kind. Yeah. Psychosis is not real. The world is created through sound and energy. That was it. So when I was talking about auditory consciousness, it also sort of falls into the string theory, right? Because if you go beyond subatomic particles, they theorize that there's string, that there's like vibrating string, which then you could make the argument, or they have made the argument, that our entire universe is essentially a kind of a concert, a concerto, right? That is produced by vibrating string. So then what comes first? Like auditory versus, and then like sound, the sound wave, and then the particle, right? And then consciousness sort of fixates or collapses the sound wave into the particle that we have now. Like that could be, I don't know, what's so weird about having a conversation with something that's not there? I don't know. What is so weird about having a conversation with something that's not there? How do you know it's not there? It's not that it's not there. It's just I cannot perceive it with my senses. So that's the difference. It's not that it's not there. Just because I can't perceive it with my human senses doesn't mean that it's not there. Like every time I see my dog, someone said don't answer that. Every time I see my dog looking off and like it seems like he's like interacting with something, like clearly my dog's not just like he's seeing, I don't think he's psychotic, but he's seeing something that I cannot perceive. Babies do the same thing. You know, like when they just all of a sudden look off and they smile, that shit creeps me out. But like they're clearly like seeing something that we can't perceive. So it's not that they're not there, whatever it is. It's just that we can't perceive it. And I don't know if I want to perceive it. I'm not ready for that level. Like I'm not ready for that reality tunnel is what I'm trying to say, right? I kind of, like I like talking about this stuff. You know what I mean? But like I feel like if one day I'm just like walking and like an alien is like, hey, I'm a big fan of your podcast. Like I don't know how I would be able to handle that. Like I would probably be like, look, I was just talking. Like I just, why are you listening to my pod? Y'all don't have anything else better to do than listen to humans podcasts? I mean, thanks, I appreciate it, but don't talk to me anymore. In fact, erase my memory of this conversation so I can go back to just theorizing that you guys are real, because now that I've seen you and I know you're real, like, you know, it's a slippery slope, and I kind of just holding on to the little bit of sanity that I think I still have, or at least a pretense of it. Don't fucking talk to me, aliens. Is that terrible? Yeah, sorry. I've now offended whatever aliens might be standing around observing. Always ready for this Twilight Zone conversations. I stay having these weird ass conversations. I've been seeing things in my peripheral my whole life. I don't see them in my peripherals. I just feel them. And then I pretend that they're not there. My level of awareness is genius. So thank you. That's very kind. Yeah, I'd erase a meeting with an alien. I don't want to remember it because I'm already weird, guys. I'm already weird. If you guys see my videos, like, all right. So all of the crazy shit that I talk about, crazy. I don't think it's crazy, but all the sort of outer worldly things I talk about on the podcast, on my videos, all of that, right? And now throw in like an actual alien encounter. Like my lives would be fucking weird, right? Like weirder than they are now. Like I would hop on the live like, oh my God, guys, like I saw an alien. Like I don't even know. And like it didn't, like it was like a rainbow and it had no, and you guys would be like, yo, right? So, you know, I like keeping it in theory. I like keeping it in theory territory. I don't want like to know. I know how weird that sounds. It's just like, because then at that point, and then honestly, if I did like meet an alien, so this is where we're going, this is where the conversation, we started off talking about mind parasites, and then it shifted to auditory consciousness and auditory intelligence, and now we're talking about aliens. All right, let's go. I feel like if I did meet an alien, y'all wouldn't see me anymore. Fuck this place. Just kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm dead ass serious. All right, so let's see what you guys are talking about. You're surprised you haven't? Please don't say that, Zara. Why is every pretty woman insane? Oh, that's sweet. Ellis McCoy? Thank you. I take that as a compliment. I think them aliens are here, but they just look like us. I think that maybe they look like us. Maybe some look like us. Maybe some actually like take the form of us, right? That's weird. You're walking around and you think like that's a regular person, but it's actually like somebody from Mars or Venus. Or why do they have to be from another planet? Like why can't they be from another dimension? Did he get kicked out? He got kicked out. Why do they have to be from another planet? Like I feel like that's another thing that we have been conditioned. How often are you actually reading comments? I'm right. I just read your comments. I think there's another thing that we've been conditioned to sort of do. Like, I think we're conditioned to think that aliens would come from another planet instead of from like another dimension. Like, that's another thing that we really do need to think about. Like, what would an interdimensional being look like, right? Because think about it, right? You have the first dimension, you have the second dimension, you have a third dimension. Like, if you look at like 3D versus 2D even, right? A 2D looks drastically different from a 3D, right? So something from like a different dimension, like a dimension that we can't even conceptualize right now, like, wouldn't, like, I don't know if we would even be able to like perceive it. You know what I mean? So I honestly, if you are watching this and you do like movies and like, yeah, like hit me up, please. Because I want to like write a movie or work on a movie where we really do start to challenge. Like, that's what I liked about Nope. If you haven't seen Nope, I don't want to spoil it. I guess it's for, okay, I won't spoil it. But one thing I did like about Nope is that it gave you like just a slightly different perception of like what forms like an alien could take. So I did like that. But I think we need more of that. I think we need more of like less like ET and Mars attacks and more like Annihilation, but like even deeper. You know what I mean? So yeah, let's do that. It's our jobs as creators to open the minds of the collective, right? Because the reason why when you talk about aliens, everybody thinks about the same thing is because creators, writers, artists have been basically telling the same story of ET, of Alien versus Predator, right? The Greys, the whatever reptilians, they all kind of just look like humanoid. So there's a failure of imagination there, like just an unwillingness to, not unwillingness, I think that's not nice, but we're just not like willing, I guess, to push the boundaries. I said it after I contradicted myself. Anyway, to push the boundaries of what form an alien would actually take. And I really want an exploration of that. Annihilation was a movie where I really liked, where it kind of like echoed, it was like different. But like more of that, please. Me literally taking notes, watching this and reading the comments. I'm going to put this on my YouTube channel as well. So if you have missed like if you missed the first bit of this, where we're talking about auditory consciousness and could aliens, I don't know how this became an alien talk, but it's fine. It's gonna be on the YouTube channel as well. So if you don't subscribe to YouTube, please do. Help a sister out. Appreciate it. And also, this nice sweater can be purchased on my website, jolieartist.com. All right, so back to the comments. It's the first live I've ever caught. Yeah, I'm sorry, Symbiosis. I do need to do a better job of going live, but like I said at the beginning of the podcast, it's just it's me versus my mind parasite. Yeah, a Zoom community session too. Okay, DJ, I will. You created. Oh, that's sweet. Thank you, Moomin. I think I said that right. It was very sweet. Speaking of community, a very small community on Telegram. Last I checked, it was like 86 members. I rarely promote it because I want to keep it small, but if you're interested in sort of a daily conversation, the only thing I have to say is if you hop on the Telegram and you like start preaching or telling other people that they're wrong, I will kick you out. Like, you're sorry. I'll boot you. I apologize. I just want to keep the vibe like Zen. So like if you're like a Zen person and you want to like talk about like these sort of ideas, sort of like wild concepts, and you're like open-minded but like not judgmental and not preachy, please feel free to join the Telegram. Yeah, so to plug that. You're so good at moderating that space. It wasn't always at the beginning, DJ, but we had to like kind of kick some people out. Larkland, this is the first time you're just subscribing to my YouTube channel. I'm hurt. Okay, I'm just kidding. What's the name of the group? I think it's 42. It's just 42. But there's a link in the bio. Sorry. You keep asking me if I believe in telepathy. I apologize. Thank you for your consistently asking me. The aliens are going to join. Aliens, welcome. Just don't be judgmental or preachy. I do believe in telepathy. I have had experience with telepathy, and not like intentional. I just sort of noticed. Like, I have been in situations where I've like not intentional, so I'm not saying I'm telepathic. I do believe though that we as a species have latent what are considered paranormal or psychic abilities. I don't think they're paranormal. I don't think they're psychic. I think they're latent abilities that, because we have been programmed to not accept as possible, we don't use, or we don't like it. There's an expression where it says, "I'll believe it when I see it." And the book I'm reading today is called "Let There Be Light" by, I think, Stephen Hague. And he inverted it, and he said, he took it and he flipped it and he said, "I'll see it when I believe it." So I think that when you don't expect something to be possible, if you don't think something is possible, then you're essentially closing your mind from perceiving it. So if you accept it, or you're open to it, or to it being possible, then you're more likely to sort of experience it, right? So I have been in situations where I have felt what a person has felt, like almost like intensely. It threw me off. I've been in situations where I have literally been thinking about a person, and then they have called, and then they said what I was thinking. It's very strange, but maybe it's not strange. Maybe it's completely normal. But by modern, standards, it would, if I said that like to a regular person and not on TikTok live, whatever, it would seem sort of like strange, right? So I've had those sort of experiences. But do I think that I'm special? Absolutely not. I think that if you start to pay attention, you'll find that you will have experiences that are super normal or paranormal, but I think just still fall under the category of what the human mind is capable of doing, right? Like if you, in a panic, for example, can like lift a car, right? They've shown like, mothers lifting heavy cars. Well, they didn't realize that they were capable of doing that, but in the moment, because they needed to save their child or something, they lifted a car. That is super normal, but they had the ability to do that all along. It's just the right circumstances presented themselves, or had to present itself, for that latent ability to express itself. Does that make sense? So that's my thought process. How many people, for example, have had like what they call now spontaneous remission, which is a person, might have a disease, and then the disease like just kind of went away over time. Now doctors call it spontaneous remission, but perhaps it's all these names that we give to it, like adrenaline rush, but it doesn't really explain anything, right? Like, I think these abilities are latent, and that it's just the wrong or right circumstances kind of allow for these things to sort of come forth, right? Like sudden savant syndrome, for example. If a person has just the right kind of damage to their left anterior lobe, I think, they suddenly, like an ordinary person, can suddenly develop like superhuman abilities, like artistic abilities, mathematic abilities, scientific abilities. Like they can do like solve equations super fast, or like suddenly speaking languages or whatever. But like, where did that come from? What that tells me is that ability was already sort of stored or contained within the brain. The right circumstances kind of caused that to be brought forth. I'm not saying do not damage your brain. I'm not saying damage your brain. I have to put that disclaimer there. But that's so I don't think that these things are inherently special. I think we're capable of these things. Another thing, there are actual, so if you go online and you Google, so telepathic communities, there are actual communities right now, human communities that are sort of separated from Western civilization, that they report communicating with each other on a telepathic level. I actually saw a National Geographic article on this. I don't remember the tribe, and I was going to do a video on it, but then I got distracted. So I think that these things are latent, that I think that we are all capable of doing. But I think that modern society, Western society, materialist perspective has kind of conditioned us to think that these things are not possible. So if you don't think it's possible, then it won't be possible for you. Yeah. Oh, somebody mentioned, Mo mentioned twins. Exactly. Even twins. That's a perfect example. Phineas Gage. Yeah, he was from what I remember of Phineas Gage, he was, I think, like a construction worker or something like that, and he had like a pole graphic kind of go through his skull, and then he ended up being absolutely brilliant, right? Same thing. But the weird thing for me is, why is it that damaging the brain in a particular way allows you to have these sort of like superhuman experience, which has led me to think that the brain itself restricts, right? Restricts you, restricts who you really are, who we really are. But then that lends itself into a conversation as to what is the nature of our reality. Why are we in bodies that imprison? Why do our bodies restrict? Why aren't these abilities sort of like inherent? Like, why do certain things have to happen in order to sort of trigger them? That's weird to me, but I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of, is this a prison planet? I don't want to do that. I want to avoid kind of putting my mind in that reality tunnel. I love your analysis of the power of where we focus our awareness in latest podcast. Thank you. I'm going to do more of that because I sort of do feel like, especially this summer, I've been getting a lot of people in the Telegram. We've all been saying the same thing, that the internal monologue has been kind of like going off, like going ham, right? So I think I'm going to spend the next couple of weeks still doing a deep dive on the podcast where we're discussing the internal monologue. We're going to like talk about what it is or what it could be. I can't speak of what it is, right? I can only theorize. We could definitely talk about what it is, what it could be. How do we deal with it? For me, like I think I said at the beginning of this episode, or this live, I have made my day into a meditation. Really just every time I catch myself listening to this thing, I shift awareness from it. What I wrote in my notes yesterday was that if this thing, this internal parasite, is in fact a kind of auditory consciousness, then it could essentially be harnessing our ability to collapse wave functions in order to collapse itself from a wave to a particle. And that, by definition, is a parasite, right? It's like feeding off of the host and the abilities of its host in order to meet its own needs. And when I think about it in that way, it bugs me, right? Because I'm like, how are you going to use me to manifest like the reality experience that's beneficial for you? And so like that, like having that in my mind makes me like even more likely to just consistently catch myself like listening to it and just disconnecting awareness, because what we're not going to do is use my abilities to, collapse wave function, that's, beneficial to whatever this thing is. I know that sounds weird if you have no idea what I'm talking about, but I know for those who, please let me know that you guys, for those who know what I'm talking about, it makes sense. All right. So let me know that you know what I'm talking about. What is it saying? What does your internal monologue say? Like, what is self-doubt? What causes anxiety? What causes, fear? What causes regret? I mean, that's what it is, and why is it? I think what I talked about on the podcast was that it doesn't serve you. So everything in your body is meant to exist in a system of homeostasis. We are told that the internal monologue is actually your left brain, and I don't think it's your left brain. I think it's something that is attached or affixed itself to the left brain. I talked about this on the podcast. I keep saying, I talk about this on the podcast. Imagine hearing other voices speak in your head. Yeah. The inner voice comes and goes for me. I think that's the thing. So we're told on one level, that if you hear voices in your head, then you're crazy. But then when you talk to a regular person and you say the internal monologue, most people know exactly what that is, which is essentially a voice in your head, right? So then are we all mad, or is what we're defining as madness not something that's madness? Is it something else? So you really have to be careful, have to be mindful of what these sort of definitions, how they kind of change our perception of ourselves and of our reality. Because there's some people who, for example, are maybe even afraid to talk about having an internal monologue because they're afraid of being judged. But if you talk to a therapist, they'll say, yeah, that's just called inner chatter. Or they'll say, oh, that's just called, even some have said that it's like an obsessive compulsive disorder, right? It's just a symptom of OCD. So what is it? So let's talk about it. let's normalize talking about it. Let's normalize accepting that it's not you, because it doesn't exist to serve you. It doesn't exist in a system of homeostasis with you. It doesn't benefit you. If anything, it's very limiting. It can cause anxiety. It can cause depression. And in some cases, in worst cases, it can cause the loss of life, right? So let's normalize talking about this. You know what I mean? Let's normalize normalizing that, okay, we all have this thing that we're grappling with on a daily basis. And I think that if we can normalize this and accept this, then we can also have compassion for one another and understand that sometimes, for example, when a person behaves in a particular way, it's not them. It is this thing that has sort of hijacked them and it's acting through them. Colin Wilson, in his book, Mind Parasites, said that it kind of takes the form of like a doppelganger. In the book with Tico, the author, I forget the author's name, but he talks about it the same way. It says it doubles you. So it takes the form of you. It's an imposter, right? So it's eerie, but if you can hold on to that mindset, it kind of changes the way you interact with people. It kind of stops you from reacting when a person says something, right? So I get in the habit now of sort of allowing people the space to sort of be who they are, but not separating. What am I trying to say? But not failing to acknowledge, right? But I guess I should say, but acknowledging that there's them and then they're grappling with this thing. Just like I grapple with my internal monologue, they're grappling with their internal monologue. So sometimes when the person lashes out, or sometimes when a person is in a negative space, instead of attributing that, their worst behaviors to who they are as a person, I choose to actually create the separation and say, okay, that's their internal monologue that's causing them. But at their core, they're actually this beautiful, oh, look at that, that's pretty. They're actually this beautiful thing, and they're struggling with this thing, just like I struggle with this thing. So if we can normalize that, we can have compassion for each other. And that's that. We're all mad here. Yes, we're all mad here. Just certain degrees of madness, right? It's a spectrum. Yeah. All right, so if you guys have no other questions or statements, as you could probably tell, my voice starting to get tired. It's been a long one. If you missed the first part of it, this will be going on my YouTube channel, and you can watch it there. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. But yeah, do you guys have any last minute questions before I go? Let's see what you're saying. It's interesting. Yeah, I can, thank you, symbiosis. Sorry, I said that wrong. I know the exact moment when I started hearing my internal monologue, or the parasite, whatever you want to call it. Like I was walking home from school, and I was around like 6 or 7, and it was silent, and then all of a sudden, boom, I heard it. I know the exact moment that it happened, and you're right. Like, why is it at that age? So yeah. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you for all your kind words. Thank you guys for every time. I do want to extend my gratitude to everyone that came in that was well, I want to thank everybody that came in that have been grateful or graceful rather, and the interactions and the engagement, and I'm so grateful for all of you, because I don't typically go live because it's something that I grapple with. The internal monologue. This is why I can talk about it, because I know from the experience. But every time I do come on and I go live, you guys are so pleasant and you're so wonderful, and it really helps with sort of doing these. So I am grateful to you. Okay, so we have one more question from Roxy. I will try to answer it to the best of my ability, as I don't know if I have the answer. Thank you. Very kind. Okay. All right, shoot, Roxy, let's go. Let's get your question answered. Thank you. All right. First time here, you did very well. Thank you, Slim Jim, appreciate you. Waiting for Roxy. If Roxy's not here, I gotta go. Thank you, Moman. Oh, my favorite philosopher. I'm sorry, I did see that and I forgot to respond. Seneca the Younger. Letters from a Stoic. Letters from a Stoic, one of my favorite books ever. Absolutely. It's just, there are some of his writings on death, on life. Yeah, he, hands down, absolutely one of my favorite. You posted your question. I don't know how to find that. But if you could just type it in, I could be able to read it from there. What comes first, the chicken or the eggs? I think that the egg came first because, I'm sorry, the chicken came first because the egg is just like an envelope that stores information. And eggs, if you notice, all seem like look the same. So if I were a programmer, I would design the creature first before I would design the package that it goes into. So if you're going to say that, okay, this is a simulation or some sort of simulation, an augmented reality experience, then it would make sense that the creature was designed first before the egg in which it kind of holds it, right? Even the same thing with seeds, right? A seed looks like a seed, looks like a seed. They come in various forms, but each seed is congruent with the tree. And so I would design, if I was a programmer, I would design the tree first, and then I would package it in a seed or in an egg. So that is what makes sense to me. Like the chicken would have to come first because that's what a designer would do, right? Like I would design what is supposed to go into the egg first. So that's my answer. All right, guys, I'm exhausted. I've been talking for I don't know how long I've been live, but it's been great. You guys are awesome. If I missed your question, just hit me up on Telegram or Instagram or those two, or send me an email and I gotta go. I'm tired. I'm tired. This is really hard. You know what I mean? Like just sitting here talking. It's hard, especially the stuff you're talking about. So it kind of gets to be a little exhausting. So, but I'm gonna try to. I always say this, and then I don't do a live for 2 months. I'm not even about to sit here and lie to you, but I will go live again at some point in time, and then we'll try to put together a Zoom meeting for those in the Telegram group. So, all right. Using left brain creatively is so exhausting. Yeah. So don't engage with the left brain. Meditate and then use your right brain. All right, guys, get a blast. That was a Jimmy Neutron reference. All right, bye.